All right, so next up, I think, is the superintendent. Lori, are you on?
I'm
Yep, you
on.
are.
I
And Jared
am.
is standing by. So this is the
And
public schools budget, article number 25.
right. Thank you. Jared is here too. So we're both here. And I know there's school committee attending and listening in and available should we need them. So we had talked with Dean earlier today and just thought we'd kind of set a expectation for this conversation. We actually made the slides. This is a little haunting in some ways. We made the slides March 11th. I closed school on the afternoon of March 12th, and we haven't been back since. So the slides that I'm going to scan through just to remind us where we left off, we know don't reflect current reality. We've started those conversations already with the school committee. So I think we want to spend as much time sharing with you what we already shared with the school committee 2 weeks ago about the current status of FY20 and 21 as best as we know it, with a really big, long list of unknowns. I heard Ed tell you a whole bunch of what those unknowns are. So we're really coming here tonight saying we know this is an ongoing conversation. We know we've got a lot of things to play out ahead of us. We know that FY21 might be one situation and 22 be another. We want to make that a collaborative discussion and assure you that we're responsibly and conservatively managing what we have for FY20, knowing that there's a lot more to come in terms of information and strategy and discussion with you folks and Carlisle. I was actually juggling between two meetings tonight because Carlisle was meeting too. There's a gift of the virtual. I can be in two places at once, literally. But we're at a pretty high level in both communities because there's just not enough information yet. So that said, we thought it would be helpful to remind you where we were, and then Jared's going to go through our current status, and then I think we're open for discussion and any feedback. We know this is the first time you've met since the crisis started, so I'm sure it's a brand new discussion too, but I can hear hints of all the concerns you're having, just as we would have expected. So if you'll just bear with me, then we'll quickly go through where we were with the CPS budget, quickly go through the CPS capital, which is within the town manager's allocation, quickly remind you where we are with the regional budget. We are not moving the parking lot article. The school committee voted that about 2 weeks after we closed school. So that is not on your list of things to need to consider anymore. It's really just the two budgets and the very traditional capital piece that goes within the town manager's budget. So just a real quick review of that, and then Jared will take it over. I am going to screen share this so you can see the slides. So here is where we were. The school committee had voted a budget in December of the $40,782,874. Just a real high level reminder of our drivers, salaries being obviously significant, some special ed tuitions, although we're managing that better and better all the time. This shows some increase to assistant principals, but that was a trade-off so that the actual salaries of the teachers went down. So those were our major drivers going into the budget creation. Our cost savings, we can reduce considerably in special ed contractual services and some transportation. And so that is where we were with the reductions, and for a total increase of 3.54%, which was a level service budget. That was not yet synced up with your guideline, you remember. The revised recommendation was 3.29%. So we still had a delta of 97,000 to talk through. So that's where we were on that. Do we want to do one at a time, or you want me to just get through this and let Jared go, and then we can talk through it all?
I think you could just move right on to Jared's memo and Jared's assessment of where we are and
Sure.
that stuff.
Sure. And I do feel like I want to remind you that we came in under guideline on the regional budget, just to remember that. So
yeah,
we're in good shape there. Doesn't mean it's going to stay status quo, but we did come in under. And the capital is really straightforward. Some energy replacement units is the bulk of it. So Jared, they're most interested in hearing where we are.
All right. So I'll just quickly go through this. I hopefully you received this beforehand. But last month,
I got it to Dean. I don't know if they've all gotten it, so don't assume that.
Okay. So last month, the Ways and Means held a virtual economic roundtable with the state treasurer, the president of the Mass Taxpayers Foundation, the president of the Mass Budget and Policy Center, and a number of professors and experts in the field. They all expressed that we're in the midst of a very fluid situation, and until the virus peaks, projections are really to be taken lightly. Some of the major takeaways, as I stated here in my memo, was Mass has one of the largest rainy day funds at $3.48 billion, and we may be in better shape than many other states to use a portion of that fund. Projected decline in tax revenues by more than $4.4 billion. In withheld taxes to decline by about $1.2 billion. Again, these are all assumptions, projections. As you know, unemployment rates are going to increase. They have increased. The GDP is expected to fall between 5 and 7%. And lastly, and maybe the most importantly, they're expecting, or should I say, hoping for a V-shaped recovery, depending on the longevity of the virus. But they also think it could be an L or a U or a W-shaped recovery. They just don't know yet. And as Mr. Bygone said at the last, at Minuteman, we're not going to know until the Ways and Means come out. So over the past month and a half, pretty much my days have been filled with Zoom conferences with DESE, roundtables with my colleagues from Mass Association of Business Managers and Mass Association of Regional Schools. And we're trying to get up-to-date information regarding state revenues and projections, and there really just isn't any updates. They're all assumptions. They won't know anything until the Ways and Means comes. One thing we do know is the governor most likely will not have a budget before June 30th. So to prepare for this, I've been in closeout mode at the region as well as the K-8 for over a month. I've liquidated or zeroed out purchase orders to increase available balances, which is something that we don't become really aggressive on until mid-May. What I did is I moved these available balances and supplies and materials, equipment, et cetera, to contingency lines in both budgets. We have frozen on all non-essential spending. It's important for me to have real up-to-date numbers so I can plan for next year's budget. So as of April 13th, the Concord school budget had an unencumbered balance of $929,701. Although this is a bit fluid and the available balance is not what we're going to have at the end. I go into detail in this memo and I explain by DESE 1000 function what makes up the balances. We also have revolving accounts such as special ed circuit breaker and the food service account that needs to get back to where we started to plan for future years. The region has an unencumbered balance of $826,680. Like the Concord Public Schools budget, this is a result of a number of purchase order liquidations, freezing all non-essential spending. And then the athletic, food service, and circuit breaker revolving account balance also needs to be replenished with that remaining balance. In addition to the general fund side of things, I'm watching the revenues intensely. I do not feel that there'll be any real reductions in FY20. FY21 and FY22, I'm already looking ahead, will be a different story. So at this time, I'm still projecting for FY20 a $331,849 surplus in revenue for FY20. This will help us greatly in FY21 and hopefully beyond when revenues will be reduced. This money will be moved to our E&B balance, which will get us close to the maximum percentage of 5%, and we're currently certified at 4%. And as you can see, here are my projected excess revenue.
So I think, yeah, go ahead. So that's our current status. The goal here that we're very clear, and the school committee in full agreement, that we're trying to use what we can now to save for the rainy days to come. If E&D goes to 5% and we reinstate circuit breaker to what we're allowed to carry there, which is equivalent to whatever aid we've received for the current fiscal year, Jared?
Yep.
That would give us reserves that we would benefit from as we plan with you on FY21. And in some likelihood, we expect we may still have some left to return to both towns. We can't project that quite yet or give you a number, but given that Jared's called this, the monster of all budget freezes here. So we can get a pretty good handle. Our costs are fairly static. We've done a little spending on technology software to get our remote learning running, and there's not a lot of room for surprise left, I say with great laughter at this point, as everything changes every day. But we think fiscally it's pretty steady as we go here through June 30th. So that's our goal, is to build our reserves, work with you on any overage of the 5%, and then use all of that to help offset needs in 21 and 22 and revenue concerns that might come up. Jared, do you want to just talk on the bit of projected things we've heard about where the revenue cuts might be? Sure. Especially at the regional levels?
Yeah. So at the regional level, what they're going to probably look at first is regional transportation. They'll most likely reduce that. Circuit breaker reimbursement, what they were proposing this year was reimbursing 25% of the transportation costs that they never reimbursed us for in the past. So, which is good because the initial governor's budget had that in there. So most likely they would cut that, and then that would, be less of a cut for the regular circuit breaker revenue that we're expected. We get about 75% of the costs that after a certain threshold. Chapter 70, they may reduce that. I'm not expecting a ton, but those are the areas the main three areas that they will most likely use.
In the event that you do hit the 5% cap and have, other funds that you can't keep them in E&D, is there an opportunity to apply them to OPEB without returning them, or would you just then return them to the contributing towns?
Yeah, you could do that. Yep, you could pay OPEB. Right now we have
just can't stay with us, right, Jared? Can't stay in E&D.
Correct. So, so for over the 5%. You also have your revolving accounts that you can only have a certain amount in those. And we were pretty healthy going into this year. Anything after that, you are allowed to prepay tuitions, collaborative tuitions. You are allowed to pay 100%. We don't have many of those. And you can pay up to 3 months worth of the other tuitions going into next year. And that's something that we do year after year and plan for that.
Okay, thank you.
But the whole goal is to not only, FY21 is going to be very tough, but it's really going to be FY22. So we're really looking ahead for 22 and trying to save and buy now if we can, just to get ahead going forward.
So it's very fluid now, and I appreciate your candor about where things are and just the amount of effort that you're putting in to try to kind of grapple with it all. But fundamentally, we're going to need to come to a number that town meeting is going to vote for. And that we're in a really challenging position to figure out how we even throw a dart at that wall. Because, we need to wrestle with it to the point where we actually have a number that, the FinCom approves as a guideline. You may propose for either the region or K8. different numbers than we're looking at. Our committee is going to need to have a few meetings that are revisiting our guideline and try to wrestle with some of the more macro factors that you mentioned at the top end of this memo. And then in the end, you're going to need to put a number on each of these budgets that you're asking for, that the town will then be trying to work with at town meeting. So the town cannot work with this memo where it's going to need a number. That's really all I'm saying. So it's going to be hard.
We know that. And I think we were actually grateful to get an opportunity tonight to start that conversation with you. Yeah. And I think certainly for the high school, it's going to have to be a collaborative conversation with Carlisle, who's trying to come up with the same number with a different kind of approach. So we want to do that with you and not in isolation. And so let's figure out how to get to that.
Can I ask a question? Sure. I'm curious. Yep. You raised the idea of putting some money into OPEB, sort of paying it forward a little bit. By what date does that decision have to be made?
Really before July 1st.
And so I'm kind of curious, what would be the process by which you would sort of make that decision? Would you send recommendations to the two towns? And Concord, can you talk a little bit about that process so that we can get a sense of whether or not we'll be able to provide input as a committee?
Right. I mean, I think it's the school committee's decision as the region to either put more monies into OPEB, or they can, any excess they can authorize for me to prepay tuitions is normally what they do. So as you know, with OPEB, if we have monies, whatever monies we have in there, we can use that money, not that we would ever look to take money out of the OPEB account, but we can use that OPEB monies to pay for retiree health insurance if we come short in future years. But I don't think it's a big process to increase that amount. I think it's school committee discretion.
And Jared, the other point might be that just as this is a new idea that we haven't actually spoken about yet, and certainly aren't speaking for the school committee, but then you could take FY20 to help offset the number that's in the 21 budget and perhaps maintain educational services, depending on where we land with the total budget. So yep. This is the creative collaborative discussion. We have to get all the options on the list, and then each committee starts to discuss them.
Okay.
Other questions from the finance
committee makes by itself, or is that something that has to be taken at town meeting? I'm trying to understand the process.
I'm sorry, I missed that question.
So is that a decision the school committee makes by itself, or is that something that has to be taken to town meeting?
OPEB is actually a general fund expenditure. So by authorizing the budget, I believe that it already passed whatever that budget number is. Yes. So I do not believe that OPEB has to go to town meeting to increase that portion.
So Parashar, my understanding is, and I'm happy to be corrected, we as a town vote one number as our authorization for the school, both the K-8 system and also for our portion of Concord Carlisle. And then the school committee is responsible for managing that number and manipulating where the buckets are and where it gets expended. And so once it's been, authorized, it can be moved to a different accounting bucket if necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Dean, it's Wally. Can I step in here for a sec?
Sure.
This is new. While this has been going on, we've been setting up a meeting for later this week. So we will be having a joint meeting on Friday at 11, expressly to talk about some of these issues that now that both finance committees of each town have started to talk more detailed about budgets. We wanted to get together and be able to talk amongst ourselves about where we might all be headed here. You're right about the OPEB piece, but I think in this case, I would certainly recommend to the school committees that any of these sorts of things we would not make these decisions about things like OPEB in a vacuum. Certainly would want input. These are uncertain times, and I think it's going to be important that we all work together to do the best thing we can for the communities and for the students. And so that seems to be the tenor of what I'm hearing among members. That'll all be more clear on Friday.
Thank you, Molly. Appreciate that.
Mary.
I've got a comment. First of all, I want to thank you for looking ahead at this. I'm really encouraged by the work that you've done here. And your point that FY22 might be even harder is, I agree with you. I'm glad you're thinking that far ahead. I just got two comments. One is, I know you've thought about this, but are there incremental expenses that you're going to have to either train teachers or some kind of technology because of this new learning mode that we're in now? That's one thing, and I didn't hear you say anything about that. So that's one question I have. And then the other thing is, you're looking at. I know you're looking at ways that revenues could be decreasing for transportation or Chapter 70, but there are other revenues that are outside of the school budget that it will impact our ability to fund, and that's local receipts. So the Finance Committee looks at the impact upon property tax, and we depend upon a certain level of local receipts, and that's right now that's very, very vulnerable. So you might want to keep that in your your thinking as well. So it's not just funding to you; it's funding to the town that you might be asked to help regenerate. Or I'm losing my word, but you get my point. Anyway, those are the comments I have.
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, we definitely are aware of that. And that's part of why we're offering everything we are tonight, to be sure you all know we're aware of that. In terms of, the way we're doing things right now, we're just hobbling our way here with our best efforts to keep things intact for kids. And the good news is that because we're well supported in technology, grades 6 through 12 was a really simple process because those kids already have laptops. K-5, we've supplemented here and there, maybe 25, 30 families where they needed access. The bulk of the money we've spent, which is by far less than we would have spent if school were open, was to upgrade subscriptions to educational platforms so that we had a robust, rich suite of options across content and grade levels. That really what we're building is the next phased plan, which for us, we're rolling out phase 3 next week. We'll be on phase 4 by the fall, since this started March 13th. Phase 4 is much of what I think you heard Minuteman alluding to, is trying to best predict. And this is where I think one of our challenges will be is best predict the contingencies we have to have for such an unknown environment in the fall, and make sure those are reflected in the budgets while we work with you on the numbers. And if it's phased, if we're staggering kids and doing extra runs of buses, we might pick up some costs there. If we're cleaning more, can we keep up with the level of cleaning? I'm hearing some places, some of the recommendations that are starting to float out are, 2 and 3 times a day, you're just constantly wiping. We don't have the daytime staff that might be able to handle that necessarily. That's the hard work I think we have to do as we work with you on numbers. We have to be doing that simultaneously to the budget discussions. So we are actively getting ready for this phase 4 and even projecting into phase 4 already. Once we're into the second part of May, that is our primary effort, is to make all those contingency plans of a rich, robust educational environment that can fluidly adapt to whatever happens. Everything from we're back in school fairly normally, which I doubt normal will be normal at all the way to we're back, out of school for an extended period. So we want to build that and make sure we've got that, 1, so it's predictable educationally, but 2, so it's fiscally predictable too, and start to strategize all of that. So your question is exactly spot on, and probably the top priority of our work now that we're stabilizing the spring. So.
D.
I have just a question about your staffing and your teachers, how do you backfill if someone has to leave and be quarantined? What do you do with that, and what kind of cost is associated with that?
Yeah. So, and Wally was with me with the union leaders today to hear, and Court, who's I think on the call too, listening. The teachers have been incredibly resilient. So as people have had needs come up, we've had very little where they've said, I'm just not able to do it. And we haven't had a group of people just swarm in and fill the void. So there hasn't been like, we need long-term substitutes or anything like that. In fact, we've pretty much zeroed out our substitute costs at this point. They're collaborating and working in teams and taking on work for each other and filling in when others can't. And there's been no master plan for that. It's just evolved out of the great cooperative efforts they're offering. So right now, that's the answer. That's part of our work, I think, with the leaders of the union to better strategize that in this fluid environment, because I actually worry that nobody's taking sick time in this time right now. We know we've had sick teachers and had family members get very ill and even worse, and people are just doing what they need to do, and we need a plan. But right now it's really fairly cost neutral. Our message to parents has been that we aren't assuring coverage if we get to that point, Dee. So we're doing the best to offer it, but if there's just a void we cannot fill, we've told parents there's a potential of that.
And one last question I have you ever been collaborating with our libraries, the town libraries, and what has happened since they've been closed?
Yeah, actually, I'm working really closely with the libraries. They stay in touch with me constantly about the remote programs they're putting together. Okay. I'm pushing all of those out to the school community, and I hear from them regularly that when I do that, they get a much better response. So we've made that a pretty standing practice. Usually they give me 2 weeks worth at a time and I send it out. So they've been hosting author sessions and online readings. I think kids were invited to read to a dog one morning this week through the virtual opportunities. So we've been very collaborative. I'd say that's true of all the town departments and leaders, and just a really nice ebb and flow of support and opportunities and creativity.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Wade.
Hey, Laurie, can you speak to food security? Are you still distributing meals to the schools, and will that continue through the summer? Do you have a plan? And is that coming out of school budget, or is there other budget for that?
So Jared, I'm going to throw that one to Jared to talk on the food provisions and how we're funding that and what our plan is.
So right now we're doing about 30 to 40 bags per day. Each bag is about $15. So far, 100% of that has been funded through donations. I think the last time I checked Friday, I think we're up around 36,000, give or take. We don't believe we're going to be getting any reimbursement. We're continuing to look into that from the state. But we have enough monies and donations, we think, to get us through a few more weeks where we are getting more coming in daily. So we plan to run this through June 19th, which is the last day of school. We are going into Boston, I want to say 3 times a week, and it's been excellent, well received there. So it's been great. The people that have volunteered to do that, it's been wonderful.
And Jared, I think we just want to be sure everyone's aware we're providing for anyone. So there's been a number of senior citizens who've been taking advantage, and I feel like we're caring for the community, which feels good. So,
any other questions from the committee?
Dean, I have one. Dr. Hunter, just since labor costs are such a big part of the budget, as you look at the different phases that you're going to go through, is there a chance that we're going to have teaching go on in the summer or at some extended period that would impact to a significant degree what we have to pay teachers?
So I don't think we're looking at anything that would extend the school year per se, which is your biggest, that would be a huge cost. And that would be one of the reasons we wouldn't look to do that. So for the summer, we're looking at options. We have always had a K-5 program that offers for special ed. Certainly we're mandated for eligible kids. and for some regular ed kids who have had data show that there's some need there. We're carrying that forward with the budget that we had right now and planning both for in-person and remote, depending on where we are and what's going to be available. So right now, we're not expanding that beyond. What we are doing is trying to be sure kids have access to electronic tools all summer. So the middle and high school kids, normally we collect those laptops. We're going to work on a different way to upgrade and clean those and stage that over the summer so there's not one big, huge time they're down. And I'm going to be talking with the leaders about some academic mandated summer work this summer, which isn't, usually we have some, but this, I think we probably try to build out a broader suite for kids and families to try to keep the skills fresh. So not right now, we're not anticipating huge staff costs. I think we need to start looking at what the staggered piece would look like, because if we have kids really on a split schedule of, we've heard a number of various ways people might do this, which has yet to be seen, but if kids are coming in half day and half day, or somehow the school day is getting lengthened to accommodate that, that would be a cost. So we're going to start running all of those scenarios. So we've got all the numbers that would go with it. And then you pick up a bus run, double the bus runs too, to do that. So last time we met with the commissioner, the superintendents are on with him regularly. And certainly we are collaborating both with our school committees and with each other as regional districts of superintendents. Sometimes the ideas we hear floated out are every other week or half day, 10 kids at a time. Good. Those are all the questions. And I think even PPE is part of our discussion now. There's, considerable likelihood kids could be in masks when they come back, and a really broad range of, game-changing pieces for us while we try to teach and be whatever normal is going to be now. So, but kudos to the entire school-based team, because, we've turned this around on a dime to do things we've never done before, and do it fairly effectively. So
Thank you.
Thanks. Good questions.
Any more questions from the FinCom? I have a procedural note. I'm reminded by the moderator that the schedule that we would be on to conduct a town meeting on June 22nd would require us to get a FinCom report into the hands of citizens by June 8th, which means it has to close and go to press by May 22nd and be mailed by June 1st, I believe. Mailed by June 8th. So to get ourselves to a crisp budget with a guideline and a recommendation by May 22nd, if we're going to try to push for that, I'm going to be scheduling several FinCom regular meetings to try to get through that. So strap in. It's gonna be a bit of a quick sleigh ride here. So I don't know if we'll be able to, get where we need to go by May 22nd. I don't know if we're allowed to just not have a FinCom report or issue it at the last minute. Carmen might be able to comment on that. So, but that if we're gonna push for the June 22nd town meeting, we're on the hook to get our ducks in a row, and quickly. So just a reminder. I don't see anybody with their hand up or comments from the audience. Are there any citizens who'd like to raise their hand or make a comment on the conversation we're having here with the school committee and the superintendent? Seeing none, I think we can move on to the Article 28, which I think you've decided that's just the parking lot, and you just have said you're not going to move 28. Is that correct?
Correct. The school committee voted not to move that.
Okay, so we can skip that one for tonight and move on to Article 29. I think Mr. Lawson is going to talk to that, and that is the Middle School Stabilization Fund, proposing to set aside funds to offset future debt service costs. There he is. You're
Muted.
no, he's not muted. I don't know.
It was right there.
No.
I know, but his mic is your volume turned up. You don't seem to be muted. You seem to be on mic, but we can't hear you. Okay. Let's see. We hear nothing. It's unfortunate.
Do sign language.
So just a quick technical, having used Zoom more than I'd like. If you logged in and you logged in prompting to use some other audio, like your phone, as opposed to the internet audio mic, you probably need to just log off and quickly log back in and elect to use your internet as your audio.
Or Mike, you could call in with your phone and use both your phone and your computer.
Like you could also switch directly without logging in and out by clicking the up arrow next to the mic. And it'll tell you to switch to internet audio.
Oh, what a concept. Great. I was looking for exactly that. I was clicking around looking for exactly that setting.
Hey, while we're waiting, I just want to say to Jared and Dr. Hunter, I just want to say thanks for all this work that you're doing for all the kids, in Concord and beyond. It's a Herculean task that you guys are confronted with, and I just want to tip my hat to you guys. Thank you for all the work.
Thanks, Brian. It's a huge team effort, and thank you. Nobody told me this was on the list this year.
Well, Mike, can we?
Meeting ID followed by pound.
Oh wait, hey, Mike, we have a different.
We can hear you.
We have a different strategy for
Now
you.
we can hear you.
We have a different strategy for you. A little
There
microphone.
you go.
How about that? Well, good
There
evening.
you go. You're better. There you go. You're all set.
I did nothing but call you, so I don't know.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Anyway, this is Article 29, the Middle School Stabilization Fund. This article, as you know, came to the Select Board via your committee. Your committee recommended this to the Select Board. And it's an article to transfer the sum of $2 million of free cash to the Middle School Stabilization Fund. So that's the article. The Select Board was happy to affirm your recommendation, and so I guess I'm happy to answer any questions.
As it was our recommendation in the first place, are there any questions from the committee? Well,
Dean, I can just offer that the building committee meetings, we're trying to get to a certain place, and then we're going to talk about where we are. So next week there's a meeting and people might want to tune in. Much the same mindset as what you heard us say in the budgets. We know things are different, and please come be part of that.
The committee is meeting on the 14th, as Lori has indicated, and at that time they'll be at a certain point in their charge, and they'll be considering the project then again. So as Lori said, I would suggest that you, if you're interested, you would tune into that committee meeting on the 14th.
Thank you both for that suggestion. I'd just like to sort of reiterate that it appears that we're going to eventually have a new middle school, and putting money aside in a savings account to that end is still appropriate, even if the schedule may vary or the budget may vary. We're going to have debt service, and there's really no avoiding it at this point. We know that. So I think this is still a valid and appropriate article for us to be considering at this year's town meeting, and we should continue to consider it as such. So,
Dean,
but I think it is in everyone's interest on the finance committee to get yourselves apprised of the progress that's been made so far. I've asked our observer, Peter Fischelis, to write up an observer report in text form, and we'll distribute that to the Finance Committee, and I can have it posted. I suspect I can have it posted to the Finance Committee website on the town site, so that we're just apprised of the progress without having to go pour through lots of minutes or go watch a lot of video. It will be important for us to understand that project, and Peter's going to summarize that and distribute it within the next week or so. So that's coming eventually.
Dean, if you're finished with this article, can I make a very quick comment?
Yes.
Since there was a lot of conversation this evening with respect to budgets and the school, I would just remind everybody, if you don't know, the select board will be meeting this Thursday at 4 o'clock. And the main item on our agenda at that meeting is to discuss town finances. So we'll be talking about town finances from kind of two perspectives. One is just understanding where we are in the current fiscal year. And the second will be to try to understand our capacity to go forward with the 1/12 spending plan that's been authorized by the legislature if we find ourselves necessary or interested in doing that. So for the Finance Committee, it might be something of interest to you. And so I would encourage any of you to like to please attend that meeting at 4 o'clock.
Thanks, Mike.
Sure.
Do you think there'll be any new data available by that time to discuss in that meeting?
I think Carrie LaFleur is on, and my suspicion is there will be. We were going to talk about this last week, but we decided to postpone it until this coming Thursday because the fourth quarter tax payment deadline was this Friday, and we should have a little bit better handle on the actual amount of revenues that come in. But I see Carrie is there, so perhaps she could comment.
We'll definitely have a lot of new information coming out on Thursday. I'm not sure how much in advance of Thursday's meeting it will be available.
Right.
Mary.
Mary, you're muted.
You're muted.
Okay. Mike, I don't know if you know the answer, but if we do go ahead and have a town meeting on June 22nd, does that prevent us from going to the 1/12 model? So if we go ahead with June 22nd, we have to have a budget.
Sure. We deal with the budget at that
Assuming
time
it gets
meeting.
passed.
You've read the moderator.
Assuming it gets passed. Okay.
Read the
Assuming it's-
moderator's memoranda about town meetings. She would suggest that we would go ahead by identifying urgent articles, which would include the budgets, of course, to try to limit the amount of time we have to be in session and postpone the non-urgent items until sometime later in the fall. But yes, if we had a town meeting in June 22nd or any time before the fiscal year closes on the 30th, that then would be our budget.
If it passed.
If it passes.
Thank you.
D.
Thanks. Lori, do you have a date for a special town meeting with regards to the middle school project, or is that part of what you're going to be talking about on the 14th? Or
Yeah, the timeline in general will be part of the discussion. I think anything we were considering is up for discussion at this point because things are all different. So no, we don't know for sure, but anything we were talking about looks different. So I would say the meeting next week will start to lay that out.
Thank you.
We've had one select board discussion, I think, with Lori and others about, along with the town clerk, trying to understand what options we have for a special town meeting in the fall and weighing the various costs versus voter participation and timing. So relatively complicated task.
Well, thank you, everyone. Well, I'm just going to see if there are any citizen participants who'd like to raise their hand, ask questions about any of the proposals from the school. And I have one here. So I'm going to let Matt Johnson have a few words.
Hi, Matt Johnson, 21 Winthrop Street, and talking about Article 29. And it's just, I've typed my comment, but it's while we need a stabilization fund to pay for any school we build, the pandemic has accelerated the transition to more online learning models. And some of those changes may not be temporary, they could be permanent. Should we take a second look at not just the budget for the school, but also the design principles in light of that? Because it'd be unfortunate to invest in a visionary building for a bygone era.
I mean, I can answer off the top of my head, and what I know 5 weeks into remote learning virtually is that it's shown us what the strengths of that are, and it's shown us the weaknesses. And the weaknesses are the relationships and connections and collaboration between kids and teachers. And for sure, the building, and remember, we're at feasibility, so building design is still at the high level here. We certainly were building with the mindset of collaboration and teams and connections, and that being much of our priority. So I don't, if anything, I think we've been reminded that that is incredibly critical. To the other side of your point, some things that were on our list of things to try differently in the next 3 to 5 years, we're starting to do in the last 3 to 5 weeks. So we've made, leap years of progress in certain areas, and we'll reflect on what of those is healthy and productive in that climate of connection and relationship and interaction with each other. So you're right. I think right now I'm actually more confirmed that the building was going in the direction it would and should. But that's also, I think, part of the discussion of the building committee next week is sort of where we're at, what we've learned, what's different, what do we think's coming, how does that fit into design, and then the process itself in this environment and where that plays out. So great question, one we need to keep recircling back to.
Any other comments from the public? I don't see any other hands raised or questions posted. So I will look for a motion to close the hearing.
So moved.
Carl, second.
Second
from D. Ordner, and we're going to have a roll call to get us out of this thing. So, Mr. Taylor, I need a vote here to adjourn the meeting.
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds, Mr. Guariello,
Yes.
Ms. Ordner,
yes.
Ms. Hartman,
Yes.
Mr. Rubenstein,
Please.
Mr. Tarpey. Thumbs up for Mr. Tarpey. Ms. Zoll,
Yes.
Mr. Patel,
Yes.
Mr. Hickling.
No.
Was that a no? But you can stay on. What are you, outdoors? What is that? Okay. Mr. Packard.
Bye-bye.
Mr. Fischelis.
Yes.
Mr. Swain. Oh, he's not talking to us. Unmute your mic. All right, I think that's a majority. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
It's been a big success. All right, good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.